Welcome to LC Screen Talk. My name is Larry, and today I'll be discussing the 2019 films the Tomato Meter got wrong. As is tradition, once we hit July, about midway through the year, I collaborate with Rachel Wagner as we both share our picks for the most under and overrated films based on Rotten Tomato scores. So first of all, I'm going to link Rachel's channel in the description down below. So make sure that you head over to her channel and check out her picks for the most overrated and underrated Rotten Tomatoes scores and subscribe to her channel while you're there. And I cannot wait to see how our lists are similar and how they differ. Now, as I was putting my list together, scrolling through all the 2019 films on Rotten Tomatoes, I realized I'm a sucker this year. I'm a sap. It was so much easier to come up with films I thought got the shaft when it came to critics this year, rather than films I thought they praised too much. So before we get started, again, this is just my opinion. Clearly, the majority of critics disagree with me when it comes to the films included here, but these are just my thoughts. These are the films I think Rotten Tomatoes has either judged too harshly or have overpraised just a bit. Now, in years past, I've made it so that if I found a film underrated, I had to be willing to move it from rotten to fresh, and if I found it overrated, I'd have to be willing to bump it down from fresh to rotten. That's not the case this year. I couldn't quite do that, and I needed some films to get a shout out, so all bets are off. This is just, I think the score is too low, period. People were way too harsh on films, or thought they were too good. So let's go ahead and just jump off with the positive. Let's start off with the kindness and kick things off with underrated films of the first half for 2019. Starting us off, I have Men in Black International. Now, I know a lot of people think 22%, probably right about where it deserves. I think that's way too harsh. Certainly, it should be more in the realm of the sequels to Men in Black. I don't understand why this one is so much worse than the other two sequels, when in reality, I personally think this is probably my favorite of the sequels. Now, it doesn't deserve to be anywhere near the original, which is still far and away the best of the Men in Black franchise, but this was a lot of fun, and I don't understand what expectations were heading into the film, but I more or less got what I anticipated. Now, the story isn't great, but I didn't necessarily need the story to be all that great to have a fun time with it. I laughed, I thought we had some fun moments, plus we got Chris Hemsworth and Tessa Thompson working great together. We got to view their beautifulness on screen at the same time yet again, and that was enough for me. I think this definitely should at least be in the 50 percentile range, so take that as you will. Next up, I have Godzilla, King of Monsters, which currently sits at a 41% on the tomato meter. And I had a really good time with Godzilla, King of Monsters. Now, the human characters did leave some to be desired. However, I guess as a Godzilla fan, I'm accustomed to that and didn't really care. I thought the monster action was amazing, and the monsters themselves looked fantastic. So I got exactly what I wanted out of this. The big iconic monsters that I had been looking forward to seeing on the big screen were amazing. I thought the visual effects were absolutely stunning. The music was fantastic, and the acting, for what it was really strong as well. They tried to rectify what so many had a problem with in 2014 Godzilla. Unfortunately, it seemed to backfire as that film got a way better score. And I will agree it's a better film overall, but this one got the shaft when it came to critical reception, I'd say. Up next, I have Dumbo, which currently sits at a 46%, which is the lowest of the Disney live-action remakes, which isn't that high of a bar to set when all three of them are rotten. However, I thought Dumbo delivered what it set out to deliver. The elephant itself was super adorable and really cute. It attempted to do something new, something fresh and different with the story, and while that wasn't all the way successful, I certainly think it was mostly entertaining. It gave me the cute elephant I wanted with a heartwarming story. A little bit too long, but it was a sweet family film, just like it advertised itself to be. I would say this deserves to be right around 60%, at least just over the fresh meter. And while not included on my list, I also think Aladdin should be bumped up just a bit to get into the fresh zone as well. Lion King, you can stay where you are. But Dumbo definitely doesn't deserve to get beaten down to a 46. Oof. Up next, I have Glass, which currently sits rotten at 38%. Yikes! Oh my! Now, I'm not sure if this just comes from soured expectations or what, but I truly did not think Glass was worthy of a 38%. Actually, I quite enjoyed Glass. I enjoyed that we went this very pragmatic, different, shocking route by the end of the film, and I know it might not be completely satisfactory to what many people would have hoped for, but it felt logical. It felt earned, and I thought it was a very intriguing, interesting, and well thought out way to take this story. It was a risk, but a surprisingly well crafted risk in my books from M. Night Shyamalan, who easily could just fly right off the rails. Now, the very, very end in that train station, not my favorite. If we just cut off the last 5 minutes, I enjoyed where this story goes. But still, a 38%? This was daring enough, well executed enough, that it at least deserved, in my books, to be around a 70. Up next, I have Dark Phoenix at 23%. Now, this is one of the few films I wouldn't bump all the way up to fresh. I do think it deserves to be rotten, but in the 50 percentile rotten, not 23. The reason I made sure I had to include this on my list is because this is the lowest rated of all of the X-Men films on the tomato meter, and I just cannot accept that. This is over 10% beneath Wolverine Origins, and I don't know who in their right mind would ever just outright say Dark Phoenix is worse than X-Men Origins. If you think that, more power to you, but I find that to be outrageous. And honestly, I think this deserves a better score than X-Men Last Stand, which is this close, mind you, to being fresh on the tomato meter. And just speaking on Dark Phoenix itself, it wasn't great. That is for dang sure. The script had a lot of problems, but it was okay enough. It was fine enough. It was inoffensive enough that I think something more along the lines of a 50 percentile range seems much more appropriate than all the way down at 23% and the worst scored of the X-Men films. Yikes. Next up, I have the comedy Little. Now, comedies are hard to impress me with. They're really hard to get me on board with these comedies, but I honestly thought Little was a fun time with some really charismatic, good, funny performances in the lead roles. This is every bit, if not more, honestly, funny than something like Stuber, which currently has a higher rating than this movie does. Many very subpar comedies have gotten much better scores than a 46, and for what this was, for what it aimed to deliver, it was right on point, so I don't really understand so much hatred being thrown its way. If I were to rate it, I would definitely give it right around a 60%, just barely fresh, but certainly not 46. And then finally, my final underrated film of this year so far is 5 Feet Apart, which currently sits at a rotten 55%. What? I quite enjoyed 5 Feet Apart, and if you know anything about me, this is not in my wheelhouse. This is not the kind of film I'm usually on board with. However, this had a lot of heart, and it all came down, honestly, to Haley Lou Richardson giving a stellar performance and having great chemistry with Cole Sprouse. The story wasn't overly melodramatic, and while it had a few groan-worthy moments here and there, it had a whole lot of heart. It really sold the romance, and from everything I've heard, depicted the illness it was seeking to depict very well, which earned you great points in my book. Plus, I loved the side storyline with the nurse in particular, and really was intrigued by that. So I would probably put this in the high 60s, or maybe even up to a 70%. I thought it was a really well-crafted teen romance drama, and I don't understand the hate. Alright, now let's get into the films I think critics on Rotten Tomatoes were just a little too nice on. And as I said, this was a much more difficult list to come up with because, for whatever reason, I'm like Sappy McSapperson this year, and I seem to be nice to everything. But I'm going to kick off with a recent film, and that is Yesterday, which currently sits at a fresh 63%. Yeah, I'm just not buying it. A way worse love story than 5 Feet Apart that I just talked about. Yet this one's fresh and that one's rotten. What? But what is so egregious about this movie? That it turns its back on a really interesting, complex, super original, and cool idea in favor of a very bland, forgettable romance that I don't think any of us really cared about. And in doing so, it lost all logic, it lost all sensibilities when it came to that twist. Because as soon as you start thinking about any aspects of this new world brought upon by the twist, it just makes absolutely no sense. Now, I do think our two leads are both very good. There are some fun moments here or there, but all of our side characters are so cringy. And honestly, again, I just wasn't interested in the romance. I didn't find the romance all that believable, and I ended up getting pretty bored by the end of it. Next up, I have the other super easy pick for me personally, and that's Child's Play, sitting at 64% fresh. What in the world? I'm actually shocked. This movie is just self-aware enough that I think people are giving it a pass. It's over the top, it's cheesy, it's ridiculous, and it winks at that just a bit. However, it doesn't make it good. It doesn't make the concept any less generic artificial intelligence. It doesn't make the CGI and practical effects on that doll any less horrible. Just ridiculous, horrible. What in the world? There's some fun to be had here for sure, but I'm not sure guilty pleasures have a place in the fresh rating scale. This remake just isn't very good, and I think critics gave it quite the pass when scoring this one. I'm not sure why it's fresh, if I'm being honest. So next up, I have Greta, which currently sits at 60%. Now, I really debated on whether to put Greta on this list, but ultimately, this film being fresh just couldn't happen. I wouldn't knock it down all that much. I would say just down to maybe like 55%. I would keep it in the 50s. So score-wise, Greta is almost right. It's right in the correct ballpark, according to my expert opinion. However, it's just that fresh rating. Got that little tomato next to it instead of the splat, and that's why I chose to put it here. Greta had all the potential to be great, and it had some really interesting choices. However, it just never put those together and ended up with a tonal mess that came off more cheesy than actually thrilling. But you go, Isabelle Huppert. You killed it in your performance. Now that was a fresh performance, even if the film surrounding her was not. My next overrated film is Isn't It Romantic? A film it seems everybody else had so much fun with that I was left feeling meh. Isn't It Romantic currently sits fresh at 69%. This one, much like Greta, I wouldn't bump down all that much, but I definitely would throw it into the 50 percentile range. A rom-com that is skewering rom-coms, and I think it skewers pretty well. It has a lot of funny moments, it really digs at those tropes, and the first time it goes through each of its jokes, they're fun, they're funny, I'm along for the gag. However, it then starts to just kind of like recycle the same jokes for the whole second half of the film. Honestly, it's little more than a one-trick pony. Once we get it, we get it. And it's trying to have its cake and eat it too. While it's making fun of romantic comedies, it's also trying to construct a good romantic comedy within the film. And unfortunately, it doesn't construct a very good one. If the actual romance and romantic comedy within the film worked, I think I would have enjoyed this film a whole lot more. But as it stands, it fell flat for me. It wasn't really all that well developed. And once the joke kind of wore off, I was left feeling like, meh. and certainly not feeling fresh. Now, my final two are the real kind of strange ones that I really flip flopped on whether to include in this video or not. But ultimately, they just had to be mentioned. So, first up, I have Long Shot, which is currently certified fresh at 81%. Now, I thought the Long Shot was fine, and I actually don't think I would bump it down to rotten. Maybe somewhere in the 60 percentile range, honestly. But it's just that. It's fine. It is formulaic. It is a standard rom-com that didn't offer all that much new. It executes the formula pretty well, but I'm just so sick of the super schlubby guy getting the impossibly gorgeous, successful woman trope that Seth Rogen likes to implement in pretty much every single live action film he's ever done. And this one is even more unbelievable, as we just have this crass guy who doesn't dress up, who talks crazy, and is like in this relationship going out in public with a woman trying to run for president of the United States that looks like Charlize Theron. I'm just sick of it. I want Hollywood to move past this trope. I want us to get to a point where doofy guy with super hot woman is not seen everywhere and just continually played out. Deeper than that, they had fine chemistry, there were some laughs. That's why it would stay fresh, but certainly not at 81%. I mean, this is up with much superior comedies, films that had something to say, that pushed cinema forward, that pushed the medium of comedy forward. Something like The Art of Self-Defense, barely ahead of this on the tomato meter, and I just don't quite understand why everyone is so enamored with The Long Shot. I guess it's not for me to understand. If you love it, you love it, and it is where it is. I just don't get it. And then my final pick for overrated on the tomato meter is The Beach Bum, which is actually rotten at 55%. And yes, I think that is overrated. I've seen some people that really liked this film, which is an uber shock to me. Just like complete stunning. Because I can find very little to like about The Beach Bum. I thought it was actually terrible. And I don't understand how it is only 5% away from being fresh. In what world? It is offensive, it is crass. If it has a message at all, it's a very negative, very horrible, just horrible message about humanity that I could never get on board with. I didn't laugh, I didn't get it. I thought it was just stupid, if I'm being honest. It was a stupid, mean-spirited film that had nearly no positives to it, and yet it sits all the way up at 55%. Honestly, I think I'd rather watch the insanity of Matthew McConaughey's Serenity to just the crass, vulgar BS that is Matthew McConaughey's The Beach Bum. Guess which one has the higher Rotten Tomato score, and it's by a lot. So I just don't get it. I would say, yes, this deserves to be rotten, but more along the lines of like 10% or lower, not 55. This is higher than Dumbo, this is higher than Godzilla, this is higher than all those movies I said on my underrated scale. What? So that's it. Those are the films I think Rotten Tomatoes got wrong with the tomato meter so far in 2019. What do you think of the films I've mentioned here? Do you think any of them are, in fact, under or overrated as I do? Or do you have some other picks that you think either got a raw deal or a bit too much praise? Let me know either in the comment section down below, or you can hit me up on Twitter. Also, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel so you are always up to date on our latest videos. I love you all so much for your continued support. Mwah! Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!